Okay, welcome back. We're now on page 355 talking about remote management. I mentioned before that it is possible that all of your network related things, your switches and routers and hubs and servers would have a separate out of band network card, a specific network just for doing remote management, and that's it. And it sounds kind of crazy, but it actually makes a little bit of sense. In a high performance world, I don't want to take away from my bandwidth on sending and receiving statistics on how well the thing is working. It's sort of like I could test myself out of performance. If my performance testing is using the same bandwidth as what I'm trying to do, it's sort of, okay, here's an electrical engineering analogy. I want to know the voltage on this line, but my meter consumes electricity. So I put it there and it goes, okay, you got 13 volts. Well, that's 13 volts because I'm measuring it. If I weren't measuring it, it'd be 14 volts. Well, that's the same thing here. I could have a 100 megabit thing, but if I'm measuring it, I'm getting 80 megabit just because I'm measuring it. So having an out of band separate network just for your stuff, it's actually a pretty good idea. Okay, so if I ask you a question about out of band, you'd be able to handle that, right? Okay, good. So a KVM switch, a keyboard, video, mouse. So I have one because I have a couple machines that here at the house. I've got an Apple machine, M1 Mac Mini. I don't use very often. And then I have what I call my Frankenstein machine. That's where I go get like the latest and greatest Microsoft betas, and I use it to beat on that thing. But I didn't want to have 2 monitors and 2 keyboards and 2 mouse because I don't use both machines. Most of the time, both of them are turned off. So I have a KVM switch, and mine is kind of cool. It's got a little panel, and you press 1, and that gives you the system 1. So the video and the keyboard and mouse all light up with server 1, and then 2 switches over to the Mac. Okay, that's just kind of how it works. Anyway, it just saves on space. Now, in the real world, there's one called an IP KVM or KVM IP, which means it's the same concept, but it's done over, instead of having a separate piece of hardware that does this thing, it's all just done magically through a piece of software that you install. So they talk about serial consoles. Well, okay, back in the day, if you wanted to tweak your Cisco router, you plugged a serial connector into the router port, hooked it up to a laptop, and you configured your router. Those are no longer done that way. It's all done over the web. Okay. Administrative network, one more time, 257. You could have 2 network cards, an administrative network and a normal network, okay? And this will be in with the routers and the switches and all that, right? Okay, cool. And you would use this for not just for management, not just for, hey, how's things going, but also for things like load balancing and failover. So I have 2 servers running my web, and I want them to be able to talk to each other, see, hey, how busy are you? Well, my CPU is running at 80%. Well, shoot, mine's only running at 40%. Maybe I ought to schedule some of that stuff over that way. And then I need what's called a heartbeat, where I say, hey, are you there? Yeah, I'm still here. Then a couple minutes later, hey, are you still there? Yeah, I'm still there. And then one day, when it fails, I say, hey, are you there? And there's no response. Hey, are you really there? No response. Holy moly, the system must be down. And boom, we start an automatic failover procedure. So those kinds of things, that little chatter that goes back and forth between the machines to spread load and for the failover heartbeat kind of a thing, that could be done through this administrative network. So it's not just for management. It could be doing for load balancing and failover. Okay. Page 258, start talking about maintenance and spares. So most likely, if you have a company, you may actually have a service level agreement, an SLA, which specifies how long. For example, I have an SLA with my internet provider that says, we're going to be available 99.9 whatever percent of the time, and then here's what we're going to promise we're going to do if there's an outage. Okay, you could have, let's say you had a hardware SLA. So let's say you bought stuff from Dell, and you have a contract with somebody who can repair Dell stuff. You have an SLA that says, even on weekends, they're gonna respond within 4 hours to be on site in 4 hours, that kind of stuff. And they're gonna do this, they're gonna do that, okay, that kind of thing. So almost all SLAs have a response time thing. And I mentioned that if you're buying RAID drives, so for example, I told you that I have a 72 terabyte RAID controller, a NAS box. And so it has 6 slots. So when I bought drives, I bought 7 identical hard drives. I bought a spare because I was not using one of the gold drives. I was using just plain old everyday blue drives. Oh, just to make the story more interesting, I found how you can go into the BIOS settings of the drive and change some of the parameters in there to make them more gold-like or red-like. I won't go into the details, but I can change the behavior so that it makes them more suitable for a RAID. But yeah, that's not the point. The point was I bought 7 drives because even though I only needed 6. That way, if one day in the future one of those drives fail, I won't have to go, dang, I wonder if they still make those, because I will already have a spare. Okay. So service contracts, obviously you purchase things in advance, right? A service contract, some sort of a thing. And they're suggesting that you ought to budget for about 10% more than what the price of the contract is. That way, you know, if there's an oh my God moment and you have to do something and the vendor says, well, okay, this is outside the scope, it's going to cost you, an extra $100 or $1,000, you're going to say, fine, go right ahead and do it. So you already have it in your budget because, in the middle of a crisis, you don't want to have to say, hang on a second, let me go call up the budget people and ask them if there's money for this. That would be bad. And then cross shipping. We had a problem with some Dell computers, and there was one particular motherboard that had a rather alarming repair rate failure. And so we were shipping them off. And after the first time we shipped them off, we called them out and said, look, we got about 3 more that have failed. Since the time we have sent you the first batch, we got about 3 more. The guy says, no problem. I'll just send you a box of these things. We went, really? He said, yeah. If you don't mind swapping the motherboards out, I will definitely. He sent us a box of 10. Didn't charge us. A box of 10 of these things because it was cheaper for them to send me a box of 10 motherboards and have me do the labor than me ship the machines back. Right? It makes sense for them to things cross in the mail. In other words, I don't have to wait until they receive my defective one before they send me the new one. I want them to send it now, and they'll get it in sometime in the future, right? Okay, good. Okay, and then selecting vendors on page 261. It would be really cool if you could buy everything from Dell or everything from HP or everything from one particular vendor. That'd be really cool. I'm just telling you, in my experience, I never had that kind of control. It was like, we're going to go out for bids, and whoever wins the bid is going to be your contractor. Yeah, okay, dang. All right, we made it to the end of this chapter, and stay tuned for the next chapter.